Make every night a wonderful journey, no matter where you are. Good night, sweet dreams. The first story, Domum, Vivum. Credit goes to Mandator for the idea. I was wandering around a trail nearby my home when I noticed something on top of a hill. It was a church tower from what it looked like to me. I decided to go check it out since it was morning and still had all day to do what I pleased. I noticed houses nearby that looked abandoned for many years along with the church. I, being too much of a coward to go into them alone, decided to bring some friends along to check them out. We didn't find anything out of place, but one of the houses reeked really bad. My friends were all goofing around while I took this place serious. I noticed something sticking out on the top of a book. It was a journal. I skimmed the first couple of pages before my friends decided to leave. There was something scribbled in the front page, but the page was in a very bad condition which made the letters illegible. It may have been the owner's name. I took the journal with me, and mostly all of the entries are normal. However, the journal was a quarter away from being finished when entries stopped. The last couple of entries read the following. I finally bought a house you to blurt out to read. The floors and the view is amazing. I could see the ocean from here and the sunlight is really nice and warm. The neighbors are really nice as well. Some have even offered to assist in helping me move in. Anyways, I have to continue unpacking and moving in the furniture. Things are peaceful at night. The only sound heard are the crickets chirping. The sky is just as amazing at night as it is during the day. No obstructions or large amounts of light obscuring the stars. I can see just about every star that is visible with eyes alone. The house seems to be in working conditions. Nothing seems to cause another chunk to blurry EPT the pipes. I'll be sure to talk to a plumber about it. My bed isn't set up entirely yet, so I'll be sleeping in the couch for tonight. I called a plumber and said he would be here around tomorrow noon. However, the pipes don't seem to have a problem anymore. Either way, I'll have them checked out, just to make sure things are alright. In the meantime, I should probably continue unpacking. I finished constructing my bed today, and unpacked all the books I had along with all the dishes. A neighbor came over as well to help me along after we finished. We sat down in the porch and had some lemonade to help cool us off. She went back home after some time with a concerned face. She left in a hurry, so I couldn't ask what was wrong. Things seem a little quieter tonight than last night. There are crickets chirping, but it doesn't sound like all of them are. It's pretty cloudy today, so I can't stargaze tonight. Might as well read a few pages of a book and go to bed. I was resting on the couch when I heard a strange noise coming from the basement. I'll have to check that out soon enough. The rest is too blurry to read. The plumber came by and said that there was nothing wrong with the pipes. I guess there was money wasted for nothing still. It feels good to know that the pipes are fine. I'll be going out to buy some groceries. I haven't seen the neighbor that helped me out yesterday. I couldn't help but notice that the walls look different since I've been back from shopping. I touched the living room walls and they felt like dry blurry in. It kind of freaked me out and has actually made me think of moving out. But I just moved in and I would need to start looking again for another house. In any case, I'll be sure on moving out of here as soon as possible. The pipes have been acting up as well, so I'm uncertain about the house at the moment. I was out working in the lawn earlier today when I heard a noise coming from the house. I've talked to some of the neighbors I've seen as well, and they all have this dislike towards the house. All the people I've talked to said that the house had an ominous feeling to it. I haven't seen all the neighbors, which makes me uneasy. There's times where I come back from work and don't feel like entering the house. I sometimes notice that the walls and roof move only slightly up and down, as if it had a pulse. I would tell the other neighbors, but I fear that they'll think I'm crazy. I remembered about the strange noises that came from the basement and went to go check it out. The pipes seemed to have some sort of water current going on in them. However, not all of the pipes are for water, which concerns me. I noticed that on a wall there was something written which read, Qui intravert Domum Vivum, consumptior. I was completely shocked to find this on the wall and went back upstairs. I went to the restroom to find that the faucet was dripping this strange fluid. It smelled like vinegar, but not exactly. It was a clear yellow kind of color. I did my business quickly and left the restroom only to find that the kitchen sink produced the same fluid. I couldn't make any sense of it anymore. The plumber said that the pipes were working fine and that nothing was wrong. Did he lie? I can't sleep due to the constant beating and what sounds like someone breathing. When I was fumbling around to turn on the light and write the sentry, the walls didn't feel the same as they did before. It feels like it got moisture in them now. They also grew pinker and more skin-like. I can't get out. I can't find the door nor windows. I woke up and it was completely pitch black. I had to search for the light switch that I regret turning on. The walls became skin, actual skin. I could see the little veins that run throughout the skin walls. The bathroom reeks really bad of vinegar, and the weird clear, yellow substance is all over the place. The beating is extremely loud and so is the breathing. I can't pinpoint where the beating or the breathing is coming from. I went to the living room and I could see light passing through the skin. I'm certain that there's a window behind all the lighter colored skin sections. If I could find a knife, I would cut through the skin, but the knives are all in the kitchen drawers, which have been entirely covered by the skin-like walls. I banged and punched the skin and I could hear what I believe are grunts due to pain. The basement is covered with what I believe is some sort of giant, bushy to black thing. It looks like some sort of intestine to me. It appears like it can open and close when needed to. Just thinking of the fact that the intestine, like thing, can open and close makes me feel like food. I tried screaming, but I don't think anyone heard me. The electricity went out, and the only light I have is the light passing through the skin. Oh, how I miss the outside. It feels stuffy and humid in this house. Most of the rooms have been blocked off by the skin-like walls. The only rooms accessible are the kitchen, the bedroom and the bathrooms on both floors. The faucets have lost their shape and became these vein-like things which are drooping down into the sinks. They're also releasing more of that awful smelling fluid. There's little puddles downstairs already, and I fear that if this continues, I may either drown or suffocate from the smell. I went downstairs to attempt on getting out again. The stairs have been blocked off, and the only thing that can pass through is the fluid. I have almost managed to claw my way out of here. Hopefully, I'll manage to break the window and at least call for help if I can't escape. I've also looked around for anything sharp to help me out, but there's nothing I could use. The skin has covered everything, so I'm stuck in an empty room that has the shape of what used to be there. I can't write any longer at night, for it's too dark to see. I could hear the crickets outside again. I miss the night sky, the cool air, the sea. However, I miss the stars the most. The rest of the paragraph is illegible. My shins and feet are in pain. I believe that this fluid is some sort of acid, stomach acid, now that I think of it. But stomach acid isn't yellow in any case. I have to get out of it and get to higher ground. The last paragraph is almost completely destroyed, and the only words legible are "flee." The second story staying. He's been there for at least a year now. He spends most of his day looking longingly at that photo. It's a photo of his wifey, as sitting at the site of her death. She was beautiful, smart, kind, but she had a huge temper. She'd yell at most other people for the tiniest reason, and she could reduce even the bravest of men to shambles with her fury. Even then, it didn't matter to him. He loved her, and he had the patience of a saint. It was their anniversary that night. 10 happy years of being together. The accident was on the front page. A drunk driver crashed into their car. He escaped miraculously unharmed, while his wife died near instantly from the impact with the street lamp. He loved her like no other. He was a wreck at the funeral. They had to practically tear him from the coffin when it was lowered. He's had so many offers, but to each he'd say he refused to marry. At least not until his promise with his beloved was fulfilled. It's unhealthy. He keeps sitting on that spot, telling me that he's not going to move, that he's staying. He still can't let go. He needs to go back. The company needs him. The stocks dropped 30% since he left. He still won't listen to me. He still stays, claiming she'd come back. He promised her an anniversary like no other. He says she promised the same. He says it was one thing in common we had. He says that they'd never break a promise. He stands up and smiles. He walks up to me with a smile and tears in his eyes. I think he's just lost his mind. He looks like he's about to break down. He tells me he's ready to go back. He grabs my hand and reassures me that he is right in his mind. He is ready to go back. We head to the parking lot to grab the car. Before we go, I take one last look at the corner. It is imperceptible from under the glow of the street lamp, and even from far away you'd barely see it. It would probably only be by being close to the corner that anyone would see it clearly. The shadow of a woman waving goodbye. The third story. Lyford, West Virginia. Many forests. Lyford is a small rural town located in West Virginia, United States. Established in 1717 by William Lyford, the town was never large nor wealthy, and sustained itself primarily on the fishing business situated at Lyford Lake. The town was, and remains today, an unincorporated community several miles from any other town, is surrounded by dense Virginian pine forest and is noted for its isolated location and closeted community. The most recent census, conducted in the area in 1990, indicated that the population was around 700 people, 37.7 of which were below the poverty line. Lyford is infamous for its dark history. A supposed curse. The town was struck with frequent tragedy from its earliest days, when a local man known as Mad Jack massacred 13 townsfolk. Wearing a dog's face as a mask, he was never caught. After escaping into the surrounding woods, a small factory and oil drill built in Lyford in the 1830s burned to the ground in 1840. Smog and ground chemicals produced by the factory killed off much of the surrounding forest, poisoned the water, and all but destroyed the fish life, devastating the Lyford economy. By the early 1900s, the town had already slumped into depression and became largely forgotten, even being unintentionally excluded from American maps. The land Lyford was built on was never a long-term habitat for any Indian tribes. The dense forest was sometimes used for hunting, but this practice was only in the most desperate of times. Water from the lake was not to be consumed, according to native lore, due to the water spirits inhabiting the flooded cave system beneath the lake. Why the area of land was so revered is an enigma. as it offered fertile ground, food and water when speaking to local Indian tribes. William Lyford was told that the area was perceived as a circular shape across the land. Years earlier, it appeared a circle around the circumference of the cursed place had been etched into the earth by another tribe. The etched circle remains visible today within the circle where the lake, a large expanse of forest, a stretch of marshland east of the lake, and a burned-out clearing in the woods. The forest itself had a name, translated by Lyford as the Trinity Woods, but no explanation was offered as to how it got its name. Furthermore, nothing else within the circle was given a name by the local peoples. The burned-out clearing, in which no living plant has ever grown through the blackened soil, was to be the place of an important, grim event in Lyford's history. In 1718, the construction of William Lyford's home was completed, after several unfortunate accidents resulting in the deaths of two builders. At its time the largest home in the town, it was a place avoided by the locals due to the tragic case of William's youngest daughter, Lily, aged 13, who went missing in the Trinity Woods for almost a month. She was found in the clearing, severely bruised and covered in blood. With much difficulty could she speak at all to the young men who came across her by chance. When first discovered, it is known that she mentioned a circle of light. Before becoming unconscious, the clearing had been searched many times before Lily was discovered there, and her enigmatic words caused tension in the small community. When at home, she took the upstairs room of the house as her own. It would be in this room that she spent the rest of her days, having contracted a totally unknown illness which caused bleeding skin lesions to come and go, hair loss and mental deterioration. The only people to ever see Lily again during her time in the room were her father and older sister, Lydia, aged 16, as well as the many doctors from all over the United States, called in privately and discreetly. None were able to help, and inhuman screams from the Lyford house were heard regularly for many years by townsfolk. Many believed that Lily was possessed, and speaking of her in public, especially near William Lyford, was taboo. William himself never mentioned his other daughter, as the townsfolk called her. Again, Lily died in 1740, days before her father, but Lydia, who inherited the house, claimed to continue seeing and hearing her sister frequently in the house. Sometimes she would walk past that horrible room and glimpse Lily's grotesque, bald face staring up at her from the supposedly empty bed. She refused to enter the room herself, and guests who did always reported feeling a presence in the room. The ghost of Lily Lyford eventually became too much for Lydia, and after less than a year alone she refused to enter the house. She eventually left Lyford altogether with her husband. Years later, from then on, the house remained empty, yet the screaming from the upstairs room carried on. Almost every night in 1780, Lyford became the setting of the Mad Jack murders. Mad Jack had arrived in Lyford 2 decades previously, with his mother, father and younger brother. The family name is not known. The family kept to themselves in a small house by the Trinity Woods, quite far from the rest of the town. Jack was seen very rarely, but quickly gained a reputation amongst the town's youth as being unpleasant and unhinged, throwing a dead cat at a boy who picked on him. The cat incident had him removed from the schooling system, and he became a total recluse, although not an unattractive boy, particularly amongst the Lyford townsfolk, who were notoriously inbred. Jack was often taunted for being ugly John Garrow. One of the few children who were friendly to Jack would later say that Jack had, on many occasions, made the express wish to remove his ugly face and replace it with something pretty. Jack also appeared to have what was quite possibly unrecognized schizophrenia, often found talking to himself or in hysterics over faces in the lake surface. His father was by no means a cruel man, but we must keep in mind that the values of the times were very different to those we look up to now, and when Jack's father beat him for his cloud cuckoo and fantasies, it was out of parental love. Jack clearly did not see it as such and became hateful towards his father. The woman of the family was, by all accounts, a wretched mother who adored her second child, but was openly neglectful to Jack. His brother observed and replicated these feelings towards Jack. He was a year younger, but was always the more mature of the two. Some nights it was claimed that Jack was seen entering the now abandoned Lyford home. At least once it is known that his father forced him out of the house, having had enough of his son's paranoia on these nights the unexplained, and mentioned screams of Lyford Hall were never heard. His strange behavior only worsened. Some recalled seeing Jack drowning rats in the lake. On April 50, 1780, Jack brought a dog from the woods back to Lyford Hall. That night there were no screams. Jack all but lived in the hall at this point, having been rejected by his family and even his few friends. John Garrow claimed to have abandoned Jack years earlier, after an incident in which Jack cracked his own forehead with a hammer in an attempt to change his facial features. Garrow's ending of the friendship may have been the factor that finally drove Jack to violence. On the overcast, cool morning of April 1780, Mad Jack emerged screaming from Lyford Hall, a dog's face messily stitched onto his own like a grotesque mask. He first killed an elderly couple in their bed, 3 houses down from the Lyford house, on what would later become Steinland Street. Jack used a hammer to commit the murder. The next victim was a young mother, asleep with her 4-month-old daughter. Jack did not harm the child in any way, being careful to aim his blows far from the child and to kill the woman swiftly, as to not wake up her baby. He did, however, place a small dot of blood of her eyelids. Jack proceeded to strangle a woman on the path who screamed upon seeing him. The event was witnessed by several residents who watched through their windows. It was claimed that at this point he began to bark like a dog, before storming into the nearest home and stabbing Mr. and Mrs. Mons as well as the 3 guests hiding in their upstairs room. All 5 died of their injuries. By this time the Lyford police force, a small unpaid group, had entered the Mons house and were advancing upon Jack. In panic he flung himself from the window and hit the ground behind the house on his right leg. The bone was seen to tear Jack's skin as it snapped, but Jack was claimed to make no sign that he was in pain, and still barking, he sped away from the Mons house, his right leg twisting and slipping with every step. Darrow alerted the police that Jack would most likely return to his family home. By the time they arrived he had been and gone, leaving behind 3 corpses and a set of bloody footprints which trailed off into the Trinity Woods. Jack's climactic killing of the family who had taught him to hate was his most brutal act. His brother was missing his tongue. It appeared to have been ripped out by canine teeth. His toes to have been removed before he was ultimately killed by asphyxiation. Jack's mother woke upon hearing the racket in her son's room, and had no time to so much as scream before Jack was upon her, tearing her flesh and dripping off her cheeks. Jack's father suffered the most extensive mutilation, however, much of which is thought to have occurred before death, with Jack heaping kept his father alive in order to savor his pain. The eyes, lips and scalp were removed, the left arm was severed, and both legs were broken. Most of the internal organs had been crudely gouged out. Shards of glass were found inside the body once his father died from his injuries. Jack then cut the body in half with his father's own saw. The atrocious nature of the crime should have been big news. However, the townsfolk did all in their power to keep it unheard of in the outside world. Regardless, word spread of Mad Jack throughout Virginia and Ohio, until it had spread, in one form or another, all throughout America. For weeks people kept their doors locked and their windows shut at night. The people of Lyford were given no time to recover. The screaming from Lyford Hall returned as usual every night after Jack's disappearance, lasting several minutes every midnight. The family home was burned down, but Lyford Hall remained inside. In the upstairs room, a bizarre shrine was discovered, with incomprehensible writing on the walls and the dog's body lying in the bed. Chunks of flesh had been torn from the bone, seemingly by human teeth. It was dressed in a bride's gown and had a long, deep scar in its side, within which was an enveloped letter. I have seen them. They live so sadly beneath you there. Pure glow in the murk is at once beautiful and terrifying to behold. Like a dying angel, they begged Jack not to do this thing. Have you seen the eye in the woods? It is the reason you can never leave. Jack can leave. The eye has let Jack leave. We blame this thing, but pity its beauty. I must leave now. The children in the lake want to speak to me now. I think I shall return for them someday. What became of Jack after his escape is unknown. No clue of his whereabouts were ever discovered. No footprints in the dirt. No torn hair tangled in a low tree branch to anyone who stumbled into Lyford unknowingly. It would be as though Jack's bloody touch had never graced the place at all. In 1838, following a severe earthquake, oil bled from the cracked earth beneath Lyford. A wealthy New Yorker invested a considerable sum in setting up an oil drill in Lyford. This was seen by the poverty-stricken population as the town's brightest hour in years, and many became involved in the project. The employment rate rose vastly. For some time Lyford seemed to be reaching prosperous days. The town's happiness was, of course, nothing but temporary. On the frostbitten morning of January 61,840, the oil pocket beneath Lyford was mysteriously ignited. The drill burst into a tower of flames which could be seen for miles. The blaze spread quickly, hitting several residences. Of the locals who attempted to control the flames, 15 were killed. John Garrow, former friend of the infamous Mad Jack, killer-eyed as he tried to save a young boy from the inferno. He was 79, the boy was 7, he also perished. The fire lasted 3 days, until a torrential downpour diminished it, leaving behind only ash, and the drill's skeletal form standing alone among blackened trees. It stands to this day. During the economic downfall following the fire, the people of Lyford naturally sought some kind of rationalization for the chaotic, terrible thing that had happened, so it was that a building in the center of the town was repaired and became a church. Religion had never been prominent in Lyford before, but following the disaster, little else could comfort the small Christian community. It is interesting to note that, according to local lore, it was by sheer coincidence the same day the church was erected that a young, smiling priest, Henry Wilde, wandered down the road and into town. Henry Wilde identified himself to the congregation as a new priest from New Jersey. who had heard all about the church and wanted to be a part of it. Some wondered how he had heard about the church project at all, but most were delighted to have a real priest leading them. At first, the town stuck to its traditionally Christian ways, but some of Henry's more unorthodox teachings became much talked about. Henry, for example, insisted at times that as the spiritual leader of the town, he had the right to take money from the community at will and place it into personal projects, which he assured them would benefit Lyford as a whole. Aside from this, he was known as a kind and softly spoken man. He slowly but surely made the town stay closer together, and converted most, if not all, of the residents to a new religion, revealed to him, he claimed, by a glowing orb in the burnt clearing in the Trinity Woods. The cult became increasingly dependent on him, and he certainly abused his power over the townsfolk. For no reason he would sometimes make whole families fast for days on end, usually with the feeble excuse of since sometimes family members would die of starvation. Their loyalty was so fierce. In one of Henry's most unusual acts, he declared that virginal daughters of the town belonged, by right, to him, and would occasionally take a young girl to the church with him at night, after which she would never be the same by 1850. Wilde was rarely seen, living alone in the church, which was not allowed to be entered. Ever the town was absolutely under his control. Crops were grown in the name of Henry. Placed upon the altar outside the church, they would be gone by morn. However, the full horrible extent of Wilde's influence was not known until 1861, when a young Susan Moth received a letter from a friend informing her of a most unpleasant incident in Lyford. She was called into Lyford to investigate. A fellow hikers claimed that after staying a night at Lyford Motel with a friend, the two were assaulted by people unknown, dragged out of their beds, and taken into the Trinity Woods clearing, where his friend was shot dead. He managed to escape and alert the authorities. Moth was intrigued by the case and chose to stay in the motel herself. She continued reaching dead end after dead, and the townsfolk would not speak up. The motel claimed to have no record of a second guest. No matter how much she pursued the matter, she was not allowed entrance into the abandoned church. On her 7th night at the motel, Moth was gagged and tied up, then dragged into the town center by people wearing what appeared to be dogs' faces. She was, however, a physically strong woman, and was able to free her legs and run from her assailants, who followed close behind, screaming incoherently at her. She ran for life at all and slammed the door, where the dog-faced men howled at her from outside, but did not enter themselves. She ripped open her arm restraints with a broken window pane, and armed herself with a knife from the kitchen. She entered the upstairs bedroom, although two conflicting accounts were given by Miss Moth as to what occurred in the room in her memoirs, and in early interviews that she gave on the subject. Moth claimed to have leapt from the window and onto the and a roof a short way below, spending no prolonged period in the room. However, in a later interview, in her old age, Moth gave quite a different account. She claimed this time to have stayed in the room for almost half an hour, during which time the dog-faced men refused to enter the hall. Moth, however, heard noises from within the room downstairs. She registered a noise that she believed to be footsteps, and was surprised when the door was flung open by what she described as a hideously pale, gruesome old woman whose eyes and mouth were nothing but black, screaming holes. In fright, rather than by choice, Moth grappled backwards and found herself crushing through the window. The reason behind Moth's change of story is unknown. The second version is often considered unlikely and a symptom of Moth's old age corrupting her memory of the event. Some, however, consider the second version of events to be, in fact, more realistic, citing the time frame of the following events, which would not fit correctly unless Moth had indeed remained within the room for at least half an hour. The men in dog masks were upon her immediately, but in self-defense Moth slashed the throat of one and swiped wildly at the others in an effort to scare them off. They simply did not move, however, and stared at her. They then picked up the dying man, who was still gurgling as he was taken away, and left. It was at this point the young agent discovered that the church's doors had been opened, very slightly, presumably by the same man who had attacked her. Moth entered the church, and very nearly fainted in shock upon entering. Moth wrote that Henry Wilde's home in the church was a place smelling of death, limbs in all stages of decay, and flesh long ago rotted made a grotesque cocoon around the walls, behind which were innumerable bones, some animals, mostly human. I caught sight of too many skulls to name. How many of these belonged to travelers, men and women, who had simply stumbled upon this terrible place and paid for it with their lives? I caught a glimpse, at least once, of an infant skeleton, unmistakable and sickening. The people of the town, so warped in their obsession with the Almighty, all hating Henry, had sacrificed even children to him. He had eaten children. It took some time for Moth to see Henry himself. When she did, she was at first unsure if what she was witnessing was even human. Henry had finally grown into the beast he always was inside. His sins had heaved up within his flesh and turned him into something that I dare say was far beyond human proportions. I stood at first, unable to convince myself that the beast in the church could ever have been human. The limbs were impossibly long and outstretched like a pale, hairless spider. The body was hunched over and skeletal-like thin. The face, oh God, the face, the eyes inky black and always open, the nose long gone, tearing a hole into the lip through which more and more of his unending fangs tore out of the black gum. The lower jaw hung on its sockets, and out of it tongue poured out, twitching and wet. It was more horrible to realize that yes, this thing was indeed human, at least once, than it would have been to simply know of it as some demon from hell. He let out a monstrous groan and heaved towards me, his hideous smell of decay filling my lungs as he came upon me, with an intent so evil I, at first, was paralyzed. With surprising strength he pinned me down, one hand pushing down into my chest, the other leaving a wet print upon my face. I was in no doubt of my impending death, but vowed to myself that if I were to die I should take with me to hell this monstrosity. Fumbling in my pocket for my pen, I struck the thing in his eye, causing him to scream in pain and recoil. Clawing at his face, I tore myself off the ground and sprinted into the wall, fitting myself between three fresh bodies, and standing there, limp as though I were one of them. Ender seemed to follow my scent, his nostril holes widening and contracting as he sucked in long, wheezing breaths, the pen still lodged deep within his dripping eye. I knew he would find me in a bizarre moment of clarity, nothing short of a miracle. I felt on my fingertips the oil that coated the walls, trickling slowly down every corpse and every dead face, the organic oil seeping off the walls, rolling down them like sweat on some foul skin. Making a conscious effort to make as little movement As possible, I retrieved from my jacket pocket a single match I had taken from the pack they gave me at the hotel. Just before Henry could come across my hiding place, I struck the match against the wall behind me and simultaneously ignited the whole thing. The fire burst to life and spread faster than I could have anticipated, and the back of my jacket caught fire. I sprung out and Henry, hissing madly, attacked. Wasting no time, I whipped off my jacket and flung it at him. He himself was shiny with the liquid on his flesh, and the fire enveloped him fast. Henry screeched as the flames spread up his limbs, until his writhing body was all but consumed in smoke and flame. With much difficulty and immense luck, I managed to escape the fire myself. The entire church was burned to ashes. The cult was brought down. 17 people were found guilty of murder, although Moth insisted that the whole town was a part of the cult. She never spoke out, as her efforts put her in much higher respect in her memoirs, which primarily discuss the Lyford incident, allowed her to retire wealthy, if not at peace.